Hey, welcome to the Franchise Academy. If you don't know what the Franchise Academy is, we are a consulting agency that helps people with finding the right franchise for them everywhere in the country and Canada in some cases. We have been in business for 18 years. My name is Tom Scarda. I'm a certified franchise executive. I've been in franchising for more than 20 years. I've owned and operated my own franchises. I've had great success. I've also had failure. And that failure is what really made me a franchise expert. If you're thinking about franchising, there's a lot of questions you want to ask, and this is the place to do that. If you really don't know about franchising, but never knew where to go to ask the questions, now's your time. So you can feel free to put your questions in the comments, and we will answer them as quickly as possible. I am here to just help you understand the pros and cons of franchising and whether it would really be a fit for you. It's really not for everyone, and you have to understand what you're getting into. It's sort of like a marriage in a lot of ways, and so you want to play the field a little bit and understand franchises, and then when you find something you think you really like and you might want to get married, then you go really deep on the investigation, and it is the most transparent investment you could make, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is the franchise company is mandated by the Federal Trade Commission, which oversees the franchise industry, to make the buying of a franchise 100% transparent. And so there's something called the franchise disclosure document, which I can explain more about at another time. But this is really about letting you understand really what it takes. So the questions I get all the time mostly is how much is it going to cost me and how much am I going to make? And so I want to clear all that up for you on this live event. I will also talk a little bit about the quadrants of franchises is what I call it. All the 4,000 franchises, 90 industries, everything that is open to you. And I break it down by categories so you could really understand the full breadth of the franchise industry and help you make decisions based on facts and not hearsay. So, as I said, I've been in the franchise world for over 20 years, owned and operated my first franchise. Prior to all that, I was a conductor in the New York City subway. So, one thing that we'll talk about today also, and this will be about 20 minutes probably altogether, but a little bit about making that transition from signing the back of a paycheck to signing the front of the paycheck and the responsibilities that come with that. But this is all about busting the myths of franchising or the misunderstanding that a lot of people have about the business. So a franchise is a business with training wheels. And so you're partnering with an organization which has your best interest in mind. They want you to succeed. They want you to make a lot of money. The more money you make, the more money they make, but also they expand or augment their brand presence throughout the country. And so it's a real symbiotic relationship with the right franchise company. So one thing I like to touch on is that when I say the right franchise company, there's 4,000 franchises. Just because they're a franchise doesn't mean it's a good business model. So let me say that again. Just because it's a franchise does not mean that it's a good business model. There's no regulations, there's no laws or anything like that that says who could franchise a business and who can't. Anybody can franchise a business. You need to get a franchise disclosure document, be approved by the Federal Trade Commission, but the Federal Trade Commission doesn't care whether your concept makes money or whether you support your franchise owners. What they're concerned about more is sort of Patriot Act stuff, legal stuff. You make sure you're not a pyramid scheme, make sure you're not money laundering or something like that. But they don't really care about anything else aside from that. So how do you figure out what's good and what's not? Well, that's kind of where I come in my organization. We pre-screen franchises and we work with the best of the best. The fact of the matter is, as I said, anybody could franchise their business. And so how is the support for real? Well, I coach my clients to actually call as many franchise owners in the company to find out exactly how it's going. And that's what I mean by making it transparent. You could talk to the end user. So folks that are in the business for 2 days or 20 years, you could interview them and understand exactly what the day in a life is, how much money they make, and all that. Everything you need to know. Obviously, you're making a big investment like a franchise. Talking about big investment, a lot of folks feel like a myth out there is that it's a lot more expensive to open a franchise than it is to start a business from scratch. And on the face of it, that's true. But you have to understand the numbers and what you're looking at. So when a franchise company says, it's X dollars to open up the franchise, they're talking about everything from day one, starting up, your business bank account, setting up an LLC or a corporation, all the way to keeping your doors open for the first 6 months to a year, the money that's involved in all of that. And I call it buckets of money. And if you ever worked with me before, you would know the buckets of money. It's initial capital. Number one, how much does it cost to get the doors open and be ready for customers on day one? The second bucket of money that you need to have filled is your working capital or post-closing capital. So now your doors are open. You have to make money in order to pay your bills, but you're on a ramp up. So you need money to supplement the ramp up so you can keep your doors open, do your marketing, pay your staff, pay the rent if it's a store. Not all franchises are in stores, by the way. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's all about, knowing that you have a runway before you make a profit. In addition, the third bucket of money you need filled, which most people forget, is your what I call home capital. So that's the amount of money you need to have on the side above and beyond what it costs to open and operate a franchise. So if the franchise costs, $100,000 to open, you might need $50,000 above that just to pay your bills if you're going to quit your job. Or if you got laid off, which is one of the main reasons I'm doing this live today, is that so many people are getting laid off these days, mostly in the tech sector, but that will expand to all different sectors. And I was in this seat, I was in this role back in 2008. I've been doing this now for 18 years, helping people find franchises. In 2008, 9, 10, what they call the Great Recession, a lot of people turned to franchising because you could get into something that's a low investment, has very high margins, and it ramps up quickly. So you could get the cash flow and making money within, just a few weeks, a few months, let's call it 6 months minimum, but sometimes it's a lot quicker. So those kind of businesses are what I call service businesses, where the entire investment is going to hover between $75,000 and $150,000 on the high end. And there's financing available. If you have a 700 FICO score, we could get you money, 100% financing in a lot of cases, not all cases. But if you have some collateral, it's not that difficult to get money. As opposed to 2009, you couldn't get money. And so you needed to have the money saved, or you could use actually your 401k rollover, which is a little bit more in depth. But I just want you to know that you could use retirement money tax-free and penalty-free if you're under 59 and a half years old. You still could use it penalty-free as long as you're starting a new business. And it has to be from a company that you're separated from. So a prior company maybe. So this kind of information is what I help people understand. So the Franchise Academy is a franchise consulting company. I was a subway conductor before I got into this role. I actually was working out of Coney Island in Brooklyn on the D train and the B train. And one day an old timer said to me, "Hey kid, this is a great job because you'll always have a shirt on your back." He said, it'll never be a silk shirt, but at least you'll have a shirt. And I really thought that was mediocrity. And I realized that, my bosses were not wearing a metaphorical silk shirt, but business owners were. So how could I be a business owner? I knew nothing about it. I was a government guy. I didn't have a master's degree or anything like that. But a good franchise will help you grow. They want you to come in with no experience. The training is just unbelievable. And you come out of that training sounding like you founded that company. So it's interesting. I got it. So I worked with a consultant that actually works with the company I work with now. And she matched me to a smoothie concept called Maui Wowie Smoothies. I was blessed enough to be able to sell it So I built it actually for 5 years, had 3 units, sold it, and was able to semi-retire at 41 years old. I don't say that to impress you, because if I could do it, anybody could do it. I was a subway conductor. However, we bought a second franchise, and that was called Super Suppers, and that was in 2006. And in 2006, we bought this second franchise, and it was a miserable disaster. And that's what made me a franchise expert, is learning how to ascertain what makes a good business model, what makes a good franchise model, the support, the training, the leadership. So it's very interesting to understand how that works and how to pick a good business, because just because it's a franchise does not mean that it's a good business. So you got to really understand who you're getting involved with. And that's what I do, is help people understand kind of the underbelly of the industry, and also the underbelly of the entire the franchise industry and the franchise that they are interested in. So coming from being a subway conductor to owning my own business was a phenomenal leap. And I worked hard. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, I think, but it was the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And I had good days, I had bad days, but it was really great. The myth is that you need $1 million to open a business. So I want to talk real quickly. You break down franchising. I do it in really 3 categories, very generally speaking. So you could be involved in a service-based business that is operated from a home office. That investment will be between $75,000 and $150,000, somewhere in that range, depending on the business and the size of the territory. The next level is what I call simple retail. You're in a strip mall, or you're kind of on Main Street, anywhere you could lease commercial property. Because you're involved with the overhead of commercial property, your investment will start at about $200,000, and it could go as high as $400,000, $500,000, depending on how big the store is, the type of equipment that's needed, and all the variables. The third quadrant that I'll call it, I guess, is complex retail. So complex retail are the big brands that you know. It's like 10,000 square foot in the building. This is like the McDonald's and the Taco Bells and Panera Breads and things like that. They'll start at 5, 6, 700,000 on the low end and go into the millions to get open. Usually it's more conglomerates that own those kind of businesses, and not like the average guy down the street. The average guy down the street, like me, owns service businesses and owns strip mall businesses that are a lower investment and much easier to handle. My rule of thumb that you should know if you're thinking about franchising is never invest more than half of your net worth. So that gives you a little bit of a cushion in case there is a problem, in case the business doesn't work out. You'll be able to sell it, but you're not going to make all your money back, most likely, if it's if you made a bad decision and got involved with the wrong franchise. But if it is running decently and you have some customers, you'll be able to sell it most likely for about what you paid for it, maybe a little bit less. It all depends on the situation, but it's a much safer way to get into business, in my opinion, as opposed to starting from scratch. When you start from scratch, there's so many variables, and there's no way to know the answers until you do it. In franchising, you could talk to the end user and understand exactly what it is to run that business, how the franchise company is treating them. Are they really making money? How long did it take? What were the blind spots? It's all there for you to understand before you spend a dime. And that's what I love about franchising, is that it is so transparent. Another myth that I wrote down here for myself is they say that you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And that is true. You have the franchise company as a partner, but it's your business and you have to do the work. And when I was in my business, I'll tell you, I never worked as hard as I did in those businesses, as opposed to a job. A job, you kind of just, you do what you got to do and you go home at 5 o'clock. In a business, it's yours. But the satisfaction of that is phenomenal. And that's what you do it for, is building a legacy, helping others, providing jobs, providing a tax base, which is great. By the way, speaking of taxes, if you own a business, you pay a lot less taxes than if you have a W-2 job. So in a W-2, Uncle Sam takes their 30% before you ever see your paycheck. In a business, a franchise or not, you pay your expenses. You have your income, then you pay your expenses, and then after that, you pay taxes on what's left. And so your money is worth more. So I also like to say, again, about working hard in a business, it's if you're the kind of person that joins a gym and thinks that you're going to get in shape just because you joined a gym, don't buy a franchise. You actually have to show up and do the work, right? You can't, like in a gym, you got to work out. Well, in the business, you got to follow the system and do whatever it is that it takes to grow that business and be successful and make money and help others and all of that good stuff. A lot of people feel like, oh, I'm going to be married to the store. And that is not true in a lot of cases. In service-based businesses, you're actually out in the field and you are helping your staff, you're networking, you're going to the business alliance meetings and working with the Chamber of Commerce and those kind of things. So it's very, very flexible. So just as a reminder, there's 4,000 franchises that span 90 different industries. And so there's a whole buffet of businesses that you could choose from. But I like my candidates to pick and choose, kind of like a buffet. Try a couple of different things. Talk to different companies, understand what they're all about, and do compares and contrast. And that's how you'll boil down to what's going to be the best thing for you. A lot of people feel like, oh, you know what? I love golf, so I should get into a golf franchise. If you ever talked to me in the past, you know this story. Not a few years ago, but probably 15 years ago, I had two gentlemen come to me from Wall Street, and they were laid off. And they said, we want to get into a golf franchise because we love to golf. And I said, well, that's awesome. Just understand, though, probably in 6 months, you're going to hate golf if you're trying to pay your bills with it. So you want to find something that'll give you all the money and the time so you could golf to your heart's content. And that's what they did. They indulged me, they followed the system, and they found actually a healthcare business. And I haven't talked to them now probably in 5 years, which is shame on me. But I did have dinner with them about 5 years ago, pre-COVID, of course. And they told me that, they played golf in Scotland and St. Andrews. And, this is what the business enabled them to do, which is phenomenal. For a lot of people, they get into franchising and it's almost always a second career. The average age of somebody buying a franchise hovers between, 40 and 60 years old. And what happens is, in my opinion anyway, we're taught to go to school and get a job. We're not taught to buy a business. So you get a job and, something that you might have chosen when you were in college, 20 years old, and now you're 40 or 50 and you're like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And so a lot of people make that pivot and go into business ownership. And great franchise companies are looking for individuals that have 10 years corporate experience. So they have their skill set built, and then they transfer it or translate it into their own little franchise. When I say little, I just mean that you're operating locally in your community. You could build a legacy for sure and own, dozens of franchises. I know a lot of people who do that, but it's making that transition. And what happens is a lot of people, they get stuck with paying the bills, right? And it becomes like this vicious circle where they know they want to do something, they need to do something, but they got to pay the bills. And so there's ways to strategize, in a business where you can have a manager and you keep your job, at least for the beginning. And you have to be good at delegation and you got to have the money so you can pay the extra staff, but you're building something with equity. And that is what most people are doing these days, is finding something that is manager run. And Again, there's a lot of businesses that will tell you that they're manager run, but they're really not. And so if you do talk to a company, a key question to ask is, may I speak to everyone who is doing this part-time? And you need to have, 50% of the system doing it part-time in order to be real. If there isn't anyone really, or if there's only one or two people doing it that way, that's a red flag to me. That's just me. You want to make sure you find a business that has at least 25 units open and operating successfully for more than a year. Another good rule of thumb to know as you're thinking about this. The another thing that people often think about is, aside from passion in the business, is, I just want to talk about that a little bit more, is you need to be passionate, not so much about the business or the end product. You need to be passionate about the role of the franchise owner, that because you're going to be the owner. And so what is that role? Is it doing a lot of sales? If you're an introvert, that's going to hurt. Is it a role where you're doing all back office and you have somebody else doing the customer facing activities? If you're an introvert, that might be a great fit. If you're an extrovert, you might go crazy. And so you have to understand what the role is, because that's how you're going to be successful. Of course, you have to understand the business, right? You don't want to get into a snowmaking, business in Alaska, right? I mean, just to use a silly example. And you have to understand it. But just because you're an accountant doesn't mean that you should open up an H&R Block. That's probably a mistake. And for the most part, great franchise companies want people who have no experience in that particular industry, because you come with baggage. So they'd rather teach you the way they do it, have their secret sauce, their marketing, and that's what makes a real successful franchise. A lot of people feel like, oh, I want to get into something because it's missing in my community, right? There's nothing here for teenagers, so let's open up, a Top Golf or something like that. That may be a great idea, but it might not be the right idea for you. It may not be the right idea for you. And so what I mean by that, you might have, say, one of these, a bowling alley, something like that. It's nights and weekends. So do you want something that takes away from your family life or something that adds to your family life? And that is something that really has to be thought about, right? Of course, it's all about the money, right? You got to make money. And that's the second thing that you need to be concerned about. The first thing is it a fit for you? And you'll hear people talk about the cultural fit. If it's a business that's kind of like, a sales organization, rah, 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 go out, call everybody in the world, sell, sell, sell. And you're not that kind of person, like me, that would be tough. It would be, even though it might make a lot of money, it might be tough. So the culture has to fit. A lot of the businesses that I like are businesses that have what I'll call a family feel, where it's not a gigantic business, because another misnomer is that you need a giant name like Dunkin' Donuts, but you don't. But you need a great marketing system. I like a business that's small enough so you could grow with it. And that gives you the opportunity to do one of two things: have it pay you dividends into your retirement as you're sipping cocktails on a beach, or it allows you to build it and sell it like I did with my first franchise and make a lot of money on the exit, a lot more money than you would ever make in a severance package. So you could kind of hedge your bets and have a business that makes equity so you could sell it years from now. And that is a really perfect example of a great franchise opportunity. And the other thing about it is that you would be able to see other franchise owners that have done your exit strategy. So my advice is, when you're starting to think about a franchise, start with the end in mind. What do you want to do with this business? Do you want it to pay you dividends into the future, or do you want it to give you a liquidity event at the end of it? And then you work backwards from there. What kind of businesses are going to get me to this particular goal that I want? And that will also help you be successful. You got to always think with the end in mind. Dr. Covey with the 7 habits of highly effective people, start with the end in mind, and it's really a powerful way to go. A lot of people also say like, oh, I saw an empty store and I want to put a business. What can I put in there? Again, that's not the way to go about this. You need to understand what your skill set is and then go and find the right business for you. There is so many things to talk about in how to identify a great business. If you check out my website, which is thefranchiseacademy.com, I have all sorts of information on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel. On YouTube, I have, I don't know how many, 100 videos, and it's all about how to buy a business, what to look out for. I have an online course that you could do, but also my coaching service is 100% free of charge anyway. So what I do is take people through sort of a soul-searching experience to help them understand their skill set and what they really enjoy to do. And it's funny because a lot of times a skill set might be, I'm a great people manager, but you really hate managing people. So we look for franchises that have 10 or fewer employees. If that's the case, we know you could do it, but the question is, do you want to do it? Because now you're picking and choosing the traits of or the characteristics of an ideal business that suits you. And that is, in my opinion, really cool, because if you think about really any job you had, you might love the job, but there was always 1 or 2 details that you didn't like about the job. So what we try to do is find a business that meets every detail that you like and eliminates the details that you don't like, or you're able to hire for those kind of details that you don't like, and somebody else that likes doing that will do it for you. That is a great way to pick a business. So I take people through this whole idea of a soul-searching experience. Then we figure out what are the great characteristics. And then from there, we write a model that is a reflection of the candidate, meaning you. And then we use that model to sift through 4,000 franchises in 90 industries. We come back to you with a short list of companies that are really good fit and worthy of an investigation and worthy of your time to look at. A lot of times you'll go through the process and you'll figure out franchising is not right for you. And that's great. That's a really good thing, because you identified that path was not for you based on facts and not on hearsay. So it's great to go through the process. The other thing that can happen is I'm looking out for you. And if you don't seem like a good fit for a franchise owner, in my mind, with your permission, I would let you know that. And we typically will stop the process. I mean, that happens literally 30% of the time as I talk to people. And then the third option that could happen is you find the perfect opportunity and you dive in and build it and live happily ever after, which happens, with 10% of the people that I talk to. And so, again, I've been doing this for 18 years. I've, rolled up my sleeves. I've owned and operated my own franchises before this. I had great success. I had one miserable failure, but that failure is what enabled me to become a franchise expert. That failure taught me so many lessons. It's in my book, Franchise Savvy. But a great lesson is don't get involved with a fad. Here today, gone tomorrow. Unless you have a lot of money and you're just you're an investor. If you're an institutional investor, then I got good businesses for you for that, where you get in and get out in a couple of years. But if you're trying to build something, build a legacy, feed your family with this business, you want to get into something that's tried and true, something that's been around, at least in the industry that's been around for a long time. And that's how you make the best success. I have so much information to share, and it's all free on my website. So if you go to thefranchiseacademy.com, it's all there. Everything that you need to be a successful franchise buyer, be a successful business owner. And by the way, it's not entrepreneurship. I always like to make that distinction, because being an entrepreneur is, coming up with the idea and then, against all odds, making it happen, sleepless nights, all that stuff. Franchise ownership. So you own the business, but you have a coach, the franchise company, helping you. It's not your idea. You're plugging into a blueprint. You follow that blueprint in your neighborhood. You expand it. You can have, one franchise. You can have 10. There's people that literally have 100 and 200 franchises, all different industries. They balance themselves out. That is not as common. Typically, it's 1 to 3 units, and you're living happy. The flexibility is the main thing. Your freedom. I mean, you could take $100,000 out of your savings account where you're making no interest, of course, or let's say you take $100,000 out of a 401k plan. So, a couple of years ago, you were making about 10% on your 401k. So that's $10,000. But if you took that 100,000 out and put it in a business that cost 100,000 to open, you should be able to make, 3 to 4 times that. That's kind of the rule of thumb. You got to see the business making 3 to 4 times what you would have made in another investment. And, if that was the case, it was only 3 to 4 times, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But there's ways to grow and make, build wealth through a great franchise system. And that's what I help people do. So again, my name is Tom Scarda. I am the founder and the president of the Franchise Academy. I've been matching people with franchises for 18 years now. I've owned and operated my own franchises. I'm involved with the International Franchise Association, and I am a CFE, which is the Certified Franchise Executive. If you're talking to anybody out there in the franchise consulting arena, make sure they have a CFE at the end of their name. That's important. That's the only recognized designation in the world of franchising. And in addition, if you wanted to go to Amazon or on my website, I have 4 different books that you could look at. One of them is called The Magic of Choosing Uncertainty, which has nothing to do with franchising, but everything to do with making a life change. I have an online course that you could buy, and you never have to talk to me. You can go through the whole process just through the course and follow. It comes with a 110-page workbook, so you can follow along. And it's all on my website, thefranchiseacademy.com. So thanks for listening in and watching this live broadcast. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. My website, again, Tom Scarda. It's thefranchiseacademy.com. But my email is tom@thefranchiseacademy.com. Feel free to email me, and I would love to chat and see if I can help you through the world of franchising. Have a great day. God bless you, and we'll see you again soon.